Today on the Made of Plants podcast, I am speaking with Star Khechara. Now, Star is a really intriguing figure in the world of vegan and plant-based nutrition. She is the creator of the Skin Nutrition Institute, the world's first internationally accredited, evidence-based skin nutrition academy. She is the author of the Holistic Beauty Book, creator of the Facelift Diet, original founder of Formula Botanica, as well as just a fantastic person to talk to. Now, Star has this really unique ability to distill years of expertise in research into these digestible bits of real-world information with specific examples. So, without further ado, please enjoy the conversation that I had with Star Khechara, the age hacker. Now, with your background, obviously it's pretty clear that you are a recognized expert in skin health. So, let's start at the basics here. So what is it about skin health that interests you?
Well, I had eczema as a teenager. So in that kind of typical backstory of you become an expert in a thing that used to plague you as a child. I used to suffer with, I'm a very sensitive person. I have a lot of allergies and things like that. So I used to react a lot to various skincare products. I used to get eczema in my eyebrows. My eyebrows would literally peel off. And when you're 14.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. And I was 14 years old, and there's that age when you're really self-conscious, and I just thought, well, I need to, what can I do here? What can I do about my skin? And I just started looking into making my own skincare products. That was the first thing I did, really, was I was trying to sort of detoxify, as it were, what I was doing to my skin. And I started working out. I was kind of reacting to lots of different products like hairspray. It was the 90s. It was the late 80s, so the 90s. So a lot of hairspray was happening. Yeah. And really just start to look into what it is that I'm doing that I can change. Because when I went to the doctor, they just give you a generic eczema cream that they give everyone, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't work for everyone. So that was that was the start of the journey. That was the kind of that moment where I had to do something and learn something.
God, the 90s. I mean, and you're also in the UK too. So it's for anybody who's not fully familiar. So this is a fun little topic that I learned a couple of years ago. So the US and its list of banned ingredients, there's 2 or 3, but in the UK, it's hundreds. Yeah. So even with having that additional kind of layer of security of being in the UK and how they're a little bit more critical of a lot of the ingredients that they allow into some of their products, were you ever able to narrow it down to one particular product that you were not reacting well to, or was it just everything?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Yeah, we have very strict rules here. We have the EU cosmetic regulations, which are really strict, and you have to even have a toxicologist okay your product and all of this. And
oh wow, okay, I didn't even know that.
In America, I used to wish I lived in America when I was younger, because I was I could literally just set up a skincare brand and that's it. You just do it. But here you can't. It all has to be checked and tested, but which is great, because it means what you're getting is actually a lot better. But even then, when you look at how many ingredients are allowed in skincare, even in Europe, it's thousands upon thousands of ingredients, and there's new ones coming out all the time, and every single product that you use has got multiple ingredients. So it's almost impossible to pinpoint what it is. So I had to kind of almost take a really blanket approach and just be get rid of all of it and start making my own from scratch, because at least I know what's going into it, and I'm not using anything I can't pronounce.
So I've got kind of a reverse question for you that I just kind of want to kick off with this, which is, if I am looking to just age my skin as fast as possible, what would be the diet that you would recommend?
Oh, keto, paleo, carnivore.
Okay.
It's an easy answer. Yeah. Anything that's fat centric and meat centric is the most rapid aging diet you could possibly consume.
Interesting. Okay. Now, what is it about meat, dairy, the higher fat foods that just makes it so bad for our skin?
Well, when you look at all the different so we have to look at the cellular level. So we have to get all the way down into the cells. and look at what it is, like what are the different biological and biochemical pathways that both create health or create like ill health, because they're always two sides of the same coin. So what you've got about 12 of these different pathways. So there's things like inflammation, glycation, oxidative stress, hydration levels, insulin resistance, gut microbiome. And so with these kind of, that's not all 12 obviously, but I'm not listing every single thing because I might be here for hours. And so what we've got is like, you have to look at each of these different pathways, and the more they are activated in a bad way, the more aging and the more old our skin gets, and the more unhealthy our skin is. And the more we kind of like deactivate these things, that the more healthy and the more resilient and the more youthful our skin is. So when you look at something like when you start to look at the dietary aspects of these different biochemical and biological pathways, we can see that all of them are sort of like diminished by the compounds in plant foods, and all of them are sort of activated by compounds in animal foods. So for example, glycation, which is where your fibers of your skin, like your collagen and elastin, kind of end up glued together by these products called advanced glycation end products, AGEs. A genius made that acronym.
Yeah, I always think that's funny.
That's a scientist with a great sense of humor. I love it. And so when you look at AGEs, and there's a type of AGE called a dietary AGE. You literally eat them in your diet. Now, the scientists recommend that we don't have any more than 5,000 AGEs in our diet daily. When you look at something like 100 grams of bacon, it has 92,000 AGEs.
Wow.
Now, 5,000 is the maximum in a day.
Yeah. Okay. Right? So,
but
and that's just like a single serving of bacon?
Yeah, it's like 100 grams. So I don't eat meat, so I don't know what an actual serving. That's 100 grams. I imagine is not maybe that's a big portion. I'm not sure. But even if it was half that, you're still talking far beyond your daily limit, and that's just one food. And then when you look at the opposite end of the scale, and of course, everyone, I'm not just meaning bacon. All the meat products are really high in AGEs, and then as is high fat dairy like butter, cream cheese, that kind of thing. But when you look at the opposite end, what's got the least amount of AGEs, it's fruit and vegetables. And this is the same pattern for every single one of these 12 aging pathways. So, the thing that causes the least harm, or even is beneficial for that biochemical pathway, is always the fruits and vegetables, and the thing that causes the harm to it is always the animal products. So I started to notice over like years and years of gathering this research, like, oh, this is like the same dietary pattern for all of them. Like the more you look towards a Western diet, a high meat, high fat diet, the more these pathways are activated and they're aging you. And the more you look towards plant-based or go towards a plant-centric diet, the more like these pathways become like helpers, and they're actually doing things, or you're diminishing them. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, that's so interesting. So I have looked into like AGEs, the advanced glycation end products, a little bit, just kind of like over the years, but like I haven't ever done like quite as much of a deep dive on it. Now to my understanding, because we're going to get a little bit dorky about like kind of the nutritional biochemistry of it all here, but like my understanding was that the AGEs, they become their most harmful whenever they interact with like something like a simple sugar. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of so you've got exogenous AGEs and endogenous AGEs. So the exogenous ones are the ones that are formed in food before you eat it, and they're always formed in high fat foods in a high heat environment. So this is why bacon is one of the highest, because it's a high fat food. And what do people do with bacon? They fry it. So
pan fry, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So no one's like boiling bacon, probably. No, are they?
That sounds so gross.
Right. So the more high heat the cooking method, especially when it's a high fat food, that's where we get these really high spikes of exogenous AGEs. Now, endogenous ADEs we form inside our own body, and we form those when our blood sugar is high. Now, one of the things that causes high blood sugar on a chronic level is insulin resistance. And what do we know about insulin resistance? It's caused by high blood triglycerides. So again, we're looking to a high fat diet. So although there is a sugar molecule element to this, the actual cause of AGEs, whether they're exogenous or endogenous, is a high fat diet.
I wanted to pause real quick in this podcast to tell you about today's sponsor, which is nobody, or I guess just this channel. If you could do one thing to support me in this journey of trying to continue this podcast in the future, just go ahead and hit that subscribe. Click like if this is something that has brought you value so far, and feel free to comment and share. That literally means the world. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of this podcast uninterrupted.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's also interesting that there's that link with like insulin resistance, which is like, if I have an area of expertise here, which I am not any sort of recognized expert, I just used to have type 2 diabetes. So It's something I understand. But yeah, like the insulin resistance characteristic of it all, and kind of like what you're talking about, like there's so many mirrors like across the board. So generally speaking, what I usually tell people is like, think of like the way that insulin acts in your body as a delivery mechanism. That's really it. So you eat food, you get this glucose in your blood, which is normal. Every cell in your body runs on glucose, but the way that you're able to use that glucose is through insulin. Yeah. It grabs the sugar out of your blood, it puts it into the tissues, into the muscles, into the organs, into the cells. And that's kind of the pathway that it has. However, that door can essentially get blocked.
Yeah.
It's like a clogged drain. That's like my favorite metaphor for it. And so there's a lot of people that say, oh, I have insulin resistance, I need to never eat a carbohydrate again.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so you've got a clogged drain in your bathtub and you're like, the water is everywhere. There's a big problem. I'm going to turn off the water. Yeah. And it's like, you didn't fix the drain though. The drain's still clogged. So now you just have it so you could never turn on the water again, you know, which is kind of interesting because thinking about that and how it kind of ties into these AGEs, it's like, yeah, you could probably get away with some of these AGEs if you never touched a carbohydrate, you know, and it might not have maybe as much as like of a negative impact, but that's only if you never eat a carbohydrate ever again, which, let's just be honest, that is extremely, extremely difficult for somebody. And no one should just live on a ketogenic diet for years and years and years. Like we've got all sorts of research that just says for many other reasons, that's just maybe not a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, when you look at like, again, whole body health at the cellular level, what do we know about, you know, low carb diets? They're also low fiber. What does the gut microbiome live on? MACs, which stands for microbiota accessible carbohydrates. So if you cut carbohydrates out, you're also damaging, you're still activating all these other aging pathways anyway, and you're screwing yourself over because fruit is a carbohydrate, vegetables are breast milk is a carbohydrate, you know. That it's the most healthy foods on the planet are carbohydrates, and carbohydrates always come locked in tight with loads of that amazing soluble fiber, the insoluble fiber, the vitamins, the phytochemicals, the things that we are lacking generally as Western humans. They're all in those. So yeah, turning off carbohydrates is just the worst. And yeah, so looking at just the blood sugar response is only one part of the picture, and like you would know this as type 2, the insulin resistance is what's behind, is the mechanism behind that. Like, why is it you're reacting to carbs? And so what we want to do is move from insulin resistance, which is where, yeah, the drain's clogged, to insulin sensitivity, where you've unclogged the drain.
Open pathways, you unlock the key to energy in your cells, which is another one of the reasons why I see so many people that will adopt this type of diet, this type of a lifestyle. And the very first thing they do, of course, they lose a lot of weight, they start to feel better, but it's like, it's the energy levels just creep up to points that they never even knew were possible. I know that was my experience. I mentioned it in one of my videos on social media a long time ago. It was a really interesting experience for me to wake up with energy, have energy throughout the day, and then to go to bed with energy. Like I was like, I don't have to be exhausted when I go to bed. I was like, I didn't even know that was an option. I was like, this is crazy. I'm going to bed and I have energy. What?
I know. It's like I roller skate. I do like figure skating on roller skates, and during lockdown, I was doing a lot of that. Like I was out all day just roller skating, and like there were 20-year-olds and 19 and 18-year-olds skating with me, and they would have McDonald's like takeout, and then they would all lay on the grass exhausted, whereas me like in my 40s, like twice their age, I would still be, or sometimes 30 years older than them, would still be skating, and they would just be like laying there saying, how are you still going?
Going in circles around them. Yeah, I very much understand that. So like, for those that know me, I've also done a lot of music production in the past. And one of the things that happens when you get into these, like, I always call them dungeons of recording studios with no windows, and like everything is like no good air circulation, like all that fun stuff, right? And you get in there with some artists, and what's some of the first things they do? They're like, okay, it's time to eat. Where can we get some food? And it's usually like burritos, like, like French fries, takeout, like pizza, whatever it is. They just want comfort food that's going to fuel their, creativity. And I was always the guy with like a salad in the back, just like eat. And I was the only one that had energy at the end of the night, because everybody else just like, they're like 2 or 3 alcoholic beverages in, and they're just like, I don't know if I could do another take. And I'm like, I always was the person that's like, guys, let's all get salads. And everyone's like, no. I was like, ah. With that being said, now we have talked a little bit about like the greens, of course, like with my salads, my rock and roll salads. But I've with consuming a lot of your content, I've noticed that you do center specifically a lot around fruit. Yeah. Now, what is it that that you see that's specifically about fruit that makes it so positively associated with skin health?
So many reasons. So one of the things that is really important in any kind of healthy eating, especially for skin and anti-aging, is this concept of eating the rainbow. We've all heard about this, eating the rainbow, right? But what I often hear health coaches and influencers say is like, eat greens, eat greens. It's like, well, that's one color out of the spectrum, and we need all of them because the different colors actually represent different antioxidants and different polyphenols and different phytochemicals. So you have the anthocyanins in like the blue and purple foods. You've got like beta carotene in the orange foods. Greens have like chlorophyll and loads of minerals. And then you've got red foods with like lycopene and resveratrol and stuff. So we need the full spectrum. There isn't like one color that's more superior than another. And so this is where fruit comes in, because it's actually a lot easier to eat all of those colors if you are picking them, if you're eating fruit, because not a lot of people eat blue vegetables. It's more rare. And you know what I mean? And it's like, it's often easier to eat a lot more fruit than it is to eat a lot more vegetables, mostly because the flavor's so good. It's nature's candy. What's not to like? And then there are specific phytochemicals that you can sometimes only find in fruit, or they're only in higher amounts in fruit. So for example, there are some very specific phytochemicals that are really important to slowing down aging. So for one of those is called fisetin. It's in cucumbers and strawberries. You've got things like ellagic acid in raspberries, strawberries and pomegranates. And so these are much harder to find in the vegetable kingdom. You find them mostly in fruits. So when I'm looking at these 12 different aging pathways, and I'm looking at, what are the specific phytochemicals that can actually, vanquish these, aging pathways, it's often coming up fruit, all the different things in fruit, like, and even like bioavailability is better in fruit because it's a softer product. So when you think about the hardness of a carrot, it's got a lot of woody fiber in it, and that's why people often say, oh, if you want, if you want to eat carrots, you should cook them. You get more beta carotene. That's because it's such a woody plant to break down. Right, and then but if we eat a mango for that beta carotene, it's a lot softer. There's less of that more woody fiber in it, so we can actually access those that beta carotene much more easily in a more delicious way too, in my opinion.
I fully agree with that. Nothing wrong with carrots. I don't want to hate on carrots. My daughter loves them, but I raw carrots have just never been something that I like reach for naturally. Yeah, I'm much more of a mango guy myself.
Yeah.
But that's good. Yeah, it's very nice to hear that, because I'm also one of those people who like I probably over focus on greens, and it's like. And I'm not trying to avoid fruit by any means. I just want to be clear about that. But it's like in my smoothie today. So I've done 2 smoothies. I actually, right before this podcast, I actually drank your pineapple spirulina smoothie that you had posted on your Instagram. It was quite delicious. And before that, I had a green smoothie where I put, it's like a 64 ounce like Vitamix carafe filled to the very top of greens. I blend that all the way down, and then I put in, the fruits, and then kind of blend it from there. And so I'm like, okay, if I've got to, get in a pound of greens a day, which was kind of like the goal that I had for myself, I was always focusing heavily on greens. But it's good to know that, like, as we talk in here, I'm not necessarily saying like don't eat greens by any means, but like giving myself just a little bit more like room for the rainbow and focus maybe less on the green part of the rainbow, so that I can actually get a lot of these other nutrients that I'll find in, like the most delicious, colorful things in it, which, I'm super into that. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, and this is going to come up on every single podcast where I talk about fruit, what about the sugar content? Do you have like an upper limit? I know. Do you have an upper limit of the amount of fruit that you'll intake in a day?
No, I believe in fruit in abundance. And in fact, you know what? Take the B word out. It's not a belief. It's based on science. So one thing you should know about me is I am a complete and utter science nerd. I pay for access to science papers. I'm not even just reading the free ones. I pay for access to science papers, to journals, and I read journal articles pretty much on a daily basis, and I have done for about 20 years. I used to be married to a scientist, and I used to work in a scientific institute. I'm all about the evidence. So with that said,
100%.
with that said, there isn't actually a scientific upper limit for fruit at all. They tried to find one and couldn't. And in fact, the more fruit they gave the people in the study, the healthier. They were testing for multiple biomarkers, and one of them was for blood sugar, blood glucose, that kind of thing, pancreatic health and stuff. So, they didn't find an upper limit. All the biomarkers got better as the more fruit these people had. And so there isn't actually a scientific, no one's found an upper limit for how much sugar from whole fruit you can eat. Now, obviously, we have an upper limit for added sugars, which are empty calories, like it's just a glucose molecule that's been extracted, of course, because we should have upper limits for any extract, really. That includes oils and protein powders too, because they're just empty calories. They lack all the other amazing nutrients that original food had. But when it comes to whole foods, and I include juices and smoothies in this, because a juice still has the soluble fiber. It's only the insoluble fiber that gets taken away. All the vitamins and nutrients are still there. Let's just bring it back to completely whole fruit. There's no actual upper limit for that at all. You can eat as much as you want. Obviously, there is a point at which you might be overeating calories in general. Everyone's got their limit of how much food they need to eat as a human. But it's got nothing to do with the sugar in fruit. It's like I eat as much fruit as I want to.
Fantastic. Yeah. One of the studies that I actually love to talk about. So this is a real study. So if anybody wants to double check me, please, by all means, if you have an issue, drop it in the comments. I want to hear about it. James W. Anderson, 1979. This is the University of Kentucky. He puts a bunch of people who have been insulin dependent. So these are people that have been on insulin for 2 years, minimum of 2 years. He puts them on a high carbohydrate, low protein, which always freaks people out, low protein, low fat diet within 16 days. And this is like a high starch diet. So it's like a lot of potatoes, legumes, like even like breads and stuff like that. Yeah. But nonetheless, high carb, low protein, low fat. Within 16 days on this diet, the majority of the participants in the study did not have to take insulin ever again after that. 16 days.
Yeah.
The most interesting part about that study, because if that's not amazing enough, he practically force feeds these people so that they do not lose a single pound. The reason is because he does not want weight loss to be attributed towards the success.
Yeah.
And one of the things that just proves to me over and over again is carbohydrates, they're not the enemy. And there's even a guy in I forget the guy's name now. It's Brunzell, Dr. Brunzell, early 70s. He literally gives people a diet of sugar water. Dextrose in water. Yeah, this is real. Dextrose in water, and I think just the tiniest bit of protein powder, but total calories coming from protein, I think it was 5%, from fat, 0%. We're talking a sugar water diet. They consume nothing else. For the record, I don't recommend this to anybody. But after putting the participants of this study on that diet, every single one of them showed lower glucose levels and lower insulin levels.
Yeah.
Which is mind-blowing. So anytime I think about people that are afraid of sugar, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, you're afraid of fruit? I was like, what's even crazier is we actually have studies where people consume nothing but sugar water and improved their insulin response. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. And there's a study that came out a few years ago where they actually put a whole food plant-based diet, like a low fat, low protein, high carb, whole food plant-based diet against the actual recommended diet from the American Diabetic Association, or whatever it's called. I don't know the full name because I'm in the UK, but whatever your Diabetic Association is called. I
think it's
something like that, isn't it? And they took that diet, which is the recommended medical diet for a type 2 diabetic, and they did a study where they split the study and they had two different groups, and then they put the others on this low fat, low protein, high carb, whole foods diet, and the whole food diet beat the other one, which is the recommended medical diet. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's awesome. So with that being said, so it sounds like one of the big things that you promote is lower on the overall fat intake. Is there a target percentage of calories that you kind of aim for, specifically with skin health?
Yeah. So the macros I recommend for, and this is for both skin health and also age reversal and on staying young, however you want to word it, rejuvenation, is a 15% maximum of calories from fat.
Okay.
Because multiple studies have shown once we go over 15%, that's when we can get insulin resistance, because there's too much fat then in the bloodstream, and fat in the bloodstream stays there for about 8 hours. So even one high fat meal can mess up your your blood triglycerides for an entire day, pretty much. And then with protein, we go for, people will call it low protein, but it's actually just the RDA for protein. I don't know why that's low. It's moderate. I would call it moderate protein.
I would agree. Yeah, we do live in a crazy time. And it's funny because I realize that even when I say low protein, I'm like, I don't even believe that's low. And again, removing the B word, as you say, out of it, the scientific research actually shows that we need way less protein than most people actually think that we do. Right. Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. Yeah, so how much protein, let's say for someone that's my age, so roughly around 40 years old, man, weighs, I don't know, 160 to 170. How much protein do I actually need in a day?
Well, I mean, it's... No one really agrees, really. If you look at all the... You can get 1,000 science papers, or let's make it easy, let's take 100, and you'll find a slightly different answer in all 100. But the recommended daily amount hasn't changed. If you look at the actual public health officials around the world, they're all still saying the same thing, which is 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight, right? That's the standard. That hasn't yet changed. So no one in the scientific community has yet convinced public health officials to make that higher. So that's basically what I recommend, which works out to be about 9% of your calorie intake. And
gotcha.
For men, really, we probably go up a little bit to 11% of your calorie intake. But it's still the same percentage. It's just that you guys eat more food. So if you're doing 0.8, I know, like you're doing 11, it's you guys are eating more food than, it's 2,500 calories roughly for a guy, 2,000 for a woman. You're eating more, so you're going to eat more protein anyway. So you don't really need a different number. But the most important thing, and this is something that I don't really see anyone talking about, is that everyone's looking at total protein. But no one's looking at the individual need for the amino acids. Now, when we have this calculation of like 0.8 grams per kilo body weight, we actually have calculations like that for each singular amino acid based on the person's body weight as well. And who's looking at that? No one's saying, oh my goodness, this food doesn't have like my 0.12 grams of lysine in it. Like no one's saying this because we just fed this rule. We've just fed this idea of like eat more protein. But what's the point in eating more protein if we're not actually paying attention to the the essential amino acids and the actual amount that you need for your body weight? Like why aren't we looking?
Yeah,
because that's
it's yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, I'm with you. It's we do live in an interesting time where it seems to be that like, I think like mostly bodybuilders are the ones that are giving us recommendations for protein intake. And it seems to be the thing that everybody follows because the man that's literally walking around like a balloon animal with like the size of his muscles of just being like so like yoked with lack of better term. Like he's like, yeah, you got to eat like, I don't know, 2 grams of protein per pound or whatever their recommendation is. I think it's 1 gram per pound. But even still, it's just like, oh my God, that is so much. And then on top of that, I always love to bring this up too. And I love to ask people this. So if you're listening to this podcast, like I want you to answer this question just out loud in your car, listening on your headphones, whatever it is. What is the name for protein deficiency? Like the actual medical term.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. There isn't one.
Well, so the actual name, it's called kwashiorkor.
But it's not protein deficiency. That's not the name for it. Yeah. It's not,
oh, really? Oh, okay.
There's no kwashiorkor technically is calorie deficiency.
Yeah, it's a malnutrition. Yeah, and it mostly exists in kind of these underdeveloped countries where their diet is like only white rice or something like that.
Or starvation, which is like
or starvation.
So you're going to be deficient in everything. And so the standard treatment for kwashiorkor is not protein, it's carbohydrates, because that's the thing your body uses.
Really?
Yeah, so it's not actually like people will say it like, oh, protein deficiency, but it's not. Kwashiorkor is actually starvation. It's like it's calorie insufficiency, and the macro we use first and foremost for everything is carbohydrates. So actually people are put on a carbohydrate, like sometimes a drip, like a glucose drip, if they're half dead, So
that is blowing my mind. I did not know that. Yeah, I've only ever looked into it a tiny bit because I'm like, how often is kwashiorkor diagnosed? And I looked in the United States, and I think it's been like 12 times in like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 years. So it's extremely rare. But like to know that like the actual treatment for something like kwashiorkor is literally just carbohydrate, like that. That's in like
the medical journals and stuff. That's what because I remember looking this up about 20 years ago. It was back in the old 30 bananas a day forum. And
sure.
It was a conversation that came up, and I remember like looking up the kwashiorkor, and like because I had a medical. What did I have at the time? I think I was studying for my degree in nutrition at the time, so I had a lot of like textbooks around, and it was like, yeah, it said it wasn't. They sometimes call it a protein deficiency, but it's actually a calorie insufficiency. And yeah, this treatment is to feed the person, but more importantly, get carbohydrates into them. Because without carbs, without glucose running all the mechanisms, you can't even eat the protein and use it because protein catabolism, like breakdown of protein in the body as part of digestion, is really energy sucking. It's a big job for your body to do. So you need the carbohydrates first. So it's actually, it's not technically a protein deficiency name. There isn't a name for protein deficiency because it never occurs on its own. It can't.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. You are blowing my mind. This is fantastic. Yeah. I love it. Any chance that I get to go in these like deep, like rabbit hole dives in like nutrition is like my favorite thing in the world. So
yes,
I love that. All right. So let's kind of circle back around. So we were talking a lot about like the whole foods aspect of food. So, I think that you were saying instead of just consuming the sugar, like let's eat the fruit that's got all the other nutrients that's combined with it, you know, everything like that. Now, when we talked on the phone a week ago, I had mentioned this one man's name to you, Brian Johnson, and his multi-million-dollar protocol where he's consuming all of these supplements, and he has like kind of this anti-aging type of like protocol. What are your overall thoughts on supplementation, just like in general?
Yeah, I mean, that guy has taken it to some ridiculous extreme. There's nothing he's taking that's not in food, and that's the same with any supplement. There's nothing, if there's a supplement of it, it means it's already in food somewhere. And so I'm a fan of supplements only for one reason, and it's if there is like a kind of an emergency need for that supplement, or like it's a critical need. Whereas a lot of people are popping multivitamins like candy, and they don't even know if they're deficient in those things. And there is such a thing as poisoning by supplementation. So if we don't know what's going on in the body, how can we choose a supplement that's going to work for us? Most of them are very poorly absorbed. And, I did used to, I don't know if this is like an urban myth, but I did hear it directly from an environmental person that worked for the local council. And she said, when they empty septic tanks, they do sometimes find whole vitamin pills and things. And so she was actually against them. She's like, they're a complete waste of money. I tend to call them expensive urine. So because that's mostly what you do with them. Like this body is designed to break down actual food, and when we put in a synthetic supplement, they're not quite as bioavailable. I can see that they have their use if someone has like an actual medical condition where they can't process certain things. Obviously, there are always outlier reasons, but if you are a person that's quite able to eat a variety of foods and eat in a healthy way, chances are you probably don't need either any or like a couple. Like if you I live in the UK. Feel sorry for me. It's dark for half the year. We don't get any sun, so I take a vitamin D supplement in the winter, because otherwise I would become deficient because there's no sun, and until I move to a warmer climate, I can't do anything about that. So that's one of the supplements I take. But everything else, most things can come from food. So I would always say, look at the diet first, and then use supplements as the tweak at the end if you need them. But always look at the diet first, because a lot of people do use supplements to prop up a bad diet, basically. And, that's not really the direction we want.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always that like part of it too, where I'm like, there are actual studies, which, I mean, there's not a whole lot of studies on supplementation in general, just because of the simple fact of the matter of there's not a lot of money to be made by pharmaceutical companies, therefore they don't really fund it. So we just don't have a ton of really great information, but there are some studies that are really interesting that actually show that the people that consume the highest amount of supplementation actually have higher amounts of all-cause mortality as well, which to me, just that in and of itself was one of those things where I was like, oh, yeah, vitamin C, you could take vitamin C and it's not necessarily like bad. It's mostly kind of benign because, yeah, you do get it from food. But like, if you consume way too much of it, like, I was like, oh, what's the harm? And I mean, the answer to that is, well, I mean, depends on how crazy you can get with it. Like, yeah, you could give yourself a kidney stone or, some other stuff like that. But typically you just pee out the rest of it. And that's just working your kidneys on overtime, which then comes with a laundry list of consequences as well. Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that about the vitamin D too. Most people don't know that quite literally sun exposure is a very powerful production of vitamin D. So it's something like, and it depends on a lot of factors, such as like, how sensitive your skin is to the sun, where you are geographically, time of day, like all those things play into it. But generally speaking, if you can get anywhere between 20 minutes on the short end and an hour of sun throughout the day, you generally will have enough of vitamin D.
Yeah, it's
generally speaking.
And in the certain latitude or direction of the sun, because like I can go out in the sun in winter here, but it's not enough UVB rays in the winter to make the vitamin D. So it's depending on where you are in the world, even if there's sun in winter, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to even make the vitamin D, because it's the UVB rays that do it, not the UVA. And it activates a chemical in your skin called dehydrocholesterol 7. That doesn't happen when the sun is like low, like a winter sun. And so I've got like, I know people, here in the UK that'll say, oh, I'm going out for my vitamin D walk, and it's like December. And I'm like, you're not making any vitamin D now. I don't care how sunny it is. So that's why,
Sure.
so people need to know. And also, vitamin D is like an environmental vitamin. Even people who eat so-called vitamin D foods, like salmon and eggs, it's still like a sliver of vitamin D compared to how much you actually need. Like over 70%, no matter what diet you're on, over 70% of your vitamin D comes from the sun. So we all need it. We all need to get outside. And if you live in a terrible climate, you need to supplement in the winter.
Yep, there you go. Period. End of story. I like it. How do you feel about like B12?
Yeah, I mean that's the other one I take because I'm vegan. But I honestly I forget to take it all the time. I'm really not good at remembering to take supplements. That'll be the ADHD talking, obviously. I've been eating a plant-based diet. I can't remember exactly when I switched from like vegetarian to vegan, so I always just say plant-based diet, but I am actually vegan lifestyle. But it's been like 30 years, like not like meat and stuff. And I think I only just started taking B12 like a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, it's funny. No worries. Hey, listen, everybody. Pernicious anemia is pretty nasty. It's something that nobody wants if you are vegan.
I'm not.
Yeah, it's one of. What's that?
I'm definitely not recommending to not take
a B12. Yeah, I was gonna say if you're vegan, vegetarian, it's not a bad supplement to put on the list. But I mean, the good news is that you do store it in like your liver for a long time. So even if you do forget to take it like every day, that's okay. It actually works out.
And it's as well. Vegans aren't the most at risk for B12 either. It's older people because they lack the intrinsic factor, which is what breaks down the B12 molecule and splits it, so we can actually utilize it, and that starts to like decline in the later years. And also people who take laughing gas, so if you take Entonox when you're having a baby, if you take Entonox at a dental office, or if you're a recreational user of Entonox, you are destroying your B12 stores. They go like this. So
really,
yeah, and they don't always tell like new mothers this, that if they've had gas in there, they really need to take a B12 supplement. Yeah.
That's well, good to know. I mean, I've never taken. Well, I think I was at a dentist's office once where I had it when I had my wisdom teeth removed or something like that. But like, yeah, that is interesting though. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So one of the segments that I really like to do on here is just like kind of giving you 3 categories. So I'm going to give you a list of some foods, and we're just going to line them up and just knock them right out of the park for us. So we've got 3 categories. So red light, never consume this. Don't touch this at all. Just stay away from it. Yellow light, that means consume, it's fine, but just be cautious about it, be cognizant of how much you have, maybe that. And then green light, which is there are no limitations. We do not want to limit you in consuming these foods. So I'm just going to line up some foods. Let me know where these foods kind of land in those categories. All right. Wheat.
Oh, then that was not one I thought you were going to come at me with. I would say it's yellow because some people can handle grains. Okay. I would say it's not something, even if you can handle them, I would say it's not a food. I mean, I think the kind of typical modern food pyramid where all the grains are at the bottom is wrong. I don't think humans are a abundant grain eater, but I think they can be in the yellow category if you don't react to them. Me, I can't eat grains at all, and I'm really bad with gluten. I have what's called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So for me, it'd be a red. But that doesn't mean it's a red for everyone. But it would definitely not be a green.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. What about, there's a lot of people that are like, well, what about sourdough? That's different because it's like fermented. Have you noticed any like difference?
No, it's still, because if it's got gluten in it and you react to gluten, it's I mean, and the interesting thing actually with gluten is that even if you're not sensitive or allergic to it, when we eat a lot of it, which we do in the modern world, if you think about like ancient humans, wheat has a very short harvest time, right? So we wouldn't have eaten it 3 times a day forever and ever, amen. It wouldn't have been in our diet that much, right?
Right.
And so we eat a lot more wheat now, and I think this is where the problems come. And too much gluten in our and another point is wheat is grown now to have a higher gluten content than it ever was.
That's true,
right? So it's consuming more gluten than ever. And the problem is that gluten activates a chemical in the gut called zonulin. And zonulin actually destroys the tight junctions between the cells that line your gut. And that's what leaky gut is. When those tight junctions are destroyed, allowing all kinds of undigested crud and pathogens to come through into the bloodstream, that's leaky gut when those tight junctions are destroyed. So gluten upregulates the production of zonulin, which can lead to leaky
interesting. Yeah. Okay. I do occasionally consume a little bit of wheat, but you're getting me to reconsider that, because I'm one of those that loves to just optimize as much as possible. So, all right. Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but let's just hit them out of the park here. So kiwis.
Like kiwi fruit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously green.
Green, fantastic. All right.
Unless you have a latex allergy, and then it's a red.
Interesting. Oh, do kiwis have latex?
A tiny bit of natural latex. So in kiwis, avocados, I think bananas, but I can't quite remember. But definitely kiwis and avos. So if you're allergic to condoms, and then when you eat like avocado or kiwi, you get like a funny tingly mouth, that'd be latex allergy.
Huh. That is interesting to know. Okay. Good to know. All right. What about caffeine? What's your take on caffeine?
Clearly, it's the devil's food. No, I think it's. Okay, so I'm caffeine sensitive, so I can't have it at all. I think it's one of those things. Okay, so you said caffeine, not coffee, right? So you're just talking about the chemical.
Yeah, but you already know where I'm going with this. Caffeine. Yeah, so caffeine in general, I was going to get kind of general thoughts, but then also, like, what about like tea versus coffee? Is there a winner in that category?
Okay, so in terms of caffeine, we all know it's a stimulant, right? So that's not debated. I would say the danger with caffeine is that when we start to use it to prop ourselves up. So I sometimes come across people who they're coffee drinkers, and we'll be talking about sleep and human sleep needs, and I'll say, well, the science says that 7 to 8 hours for a man and 8 to 9 hours for a woman is the optimal amount of sleep. And they'll say, well, I'm okay on night 6. I'm like, how many cups of coffee do you have? And they're always a coffee drinker. And I say, get rid of caffeine for 30 days, then tell me if that 6 hours feels like enough. Because if it doesn't, if you're then tired, that means you're actually using caffeine. It's not beneficial for you to be using caffeine in that way, is what I'm saying. If you're someone having, like, I don't know, the odd coffee, the odd tea, like I do, I'm caffeine sensitive, but I love I'm British, so I do now and again have the odd Earl Grey tea, with a bit of almond milk and some agave nectar.
Delicious.
All right, it's so good. I love it. But I know that I can't have too much. But what we have this situation these days is that people are taking caffeine a lot, because it's also a nootropic. So if you're into this optimization, you'll be like, oh, caffeine's a nootropic. Okay, but is it affecting your sleep? Can you give it up for 30 days and be fine on the amount of sleep you've been having with the caffeine? Because if not, then it's actually not beneficial for you at all.
Yeah. And actually, to kind of speak on that point too, like one of the things that I heard recently about this, Dr. Amen, who's like an ADHD specialist neuroscientist, has said that he does not recommend caffeine specifically for people with ADHD.
That'll be me then. And you, right? You have a...
Yeah. Oh, I'm raging ADHD. Like, it's like I'm in like a hyper focus mode just during this podcast right now. Like, it's like always. But one of the reasons that he says is because it can restrict blood flow into the brain.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know that it does. It's funny how those like little like factoids will just be like, I don't want that.
I know,
And like,
right? Yeah. And
but at the same time, I am also just one of those people like, here's the deal. Like, because of the ADHD, the impulse control is real. That is the hardest thing sometimes. So, and if anybody is like me that's listening to this, it's one of my favorite beverages in the world is a specific type of black tea, and it's called Jinjun Mei.
Ooh.
Jinjunmei. And it's a particular variety of black tea. I know, because this was a hyper focus I went down like a couple years ago. And this particular variety of tea, without no flavors or anything, just in how it's grown, where it's grown, how it's harvested, all that, when you brew it, it tastes like chocolate and rose and toasted almonds.
Stop.
With nothing in it. And it is like, and the thing, my mouth is literally watering talking about it. And it's like, I got some once and it was like technically like competition grade. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. But like, I was like, I was like 6 cups a day because it was just like the best thing ever. And it's also incredibly high in theanine as well. So like the caffeine was there, but it was kind of balanced out. So I was like kind of in this like kind of dreamy, like fever dream really of just like caffeine overdose by accident because of that. It's one of those things, you know, you can sip from, you know, the nectar of the gods, but you don't have to steal the whole damn jug, which is something I always need to remind myself.
Right, exactly. And there are power, like what we forget is like nature is very powerful and produces very powerful, you know, herbs and natural medicines. If you think about caffeine, usually comes from a plant that we wouldn't sit down and eat a meal of. It's a medicinal plant. That's got to be respected.
Yeah. And it's like, I believe the plant also produces the caffeine as kind of like a way to like hoard off the insects too.
Yeah, most phytochemicals are like a defense mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's a defense mechanism, which, oh God, how many times do I hear that online? What about plant defense chemicals? And I'm like, those beneficial compounds?
Yeah, I know. It's like people take it too extreme. It's against like insects, not necessarily us.
Right. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Let's go back into the red light, green light, yellow light area. Yeah. Yeah. Because oh man, that was a great little side tangent rabbit hole though. Okay. So what about nuts and seeds?
Nuts and seeds are in yellow because they do have amazing benefits. Like there's a lot of vitamin E. Some seeds are obviously very high in omega-3, but the problem is that they are very high in fat. So if we're looking at this model of the dietary pattern being 15% fat, we don't want to have tons of nuts and seeds. You know, we don't want to be like sitting there like stuffing our face with chocolate coated Brazils. I'm not talking about myself. So we got to, again, it's one of those foods we need to respect, but it is an amazing beauty food. It is, you know, the vitamin E, like there are different minerals within nuts and seeds, but so many of them are very high in omega-6 as well, and you know which can tip that balance of omega-3 to omega-6 into the pro-inflammatory sort of zone. So we don't want to have, you know, I don't know if you've been in amongst the raw vegan scene before, haven't you? So you know, in the raw vegan scene, there's this like habit of making raw cakes that are literally like a base of nuts and seeds, a middle.
Yes.
And then a topping of nuts and seeds, and it's like that cake is like 90% fat. You know, this is just like you're just eating like a big slab of fat. So yes, it's a yellow food. Enjoy your nuts and seeds. Enjoy your nut butters as well, and your nut milks and your seed milks. I love all those. But just, you know, it's not like it shouldn't be the base of your diet. It's like a nice addition.
Gotcha. Okay. And then kind of on the subject of like raw vegan desserts, which is like my favorite thing in the world, like the raw vegan cheesecakes, like I
know.
I will be insulin resistant for 8 hours if I eat one of those, but it's like, I just have to, maybe not insulin resistance, but you know what I mean? What about like the, like really high sugar content fruits of like, say like a dehydrated date?
Yeah, good question. I don't eat a lot of dehydrated foods, to be honest with you, because water and you know, whenever we look at any kind of food pyramid, the one thing that's always missing that should be right at the bottom is water. So we should really look for foods that are naturally hydrating and water rich. And you know, you don't like dried food is like kind of like a man-made thing, you know, a human concept. We take those foods, we dehydrate them. And this is also why nuts and seeds, actually, this is going to feed into that. Nuts and seeds are so high in fat because we've removed the water. When you buy nuts and seeds from a store, they've been dehydrated already. And something like a pistachio nut is right, let me remember, I read this in a science paper about a year ago. So a pistachio nut is something like 20% fat, I think, until you dehydrate it. And then it's like 80% fat because you've taken all that water away. So the same argument we have for fruit, like don't dehydrate it because then you're increasing the sugar to mass ratio. The same thing happens when we dehydrate like high fat foods too. We're increasing that high fat. So this is why it's really good to soak in nuts and seeds, not just to get rid of the phytates and activate the enzymes, but because also it plumps them back up and the fat content is less per weight, you know, and the same is true of like dried fruit. So it's one of those foods where it's like one of those survival foods, isn't it? Like if you are out on like a 2-day hike, by all means take some fruit leather, take your dried figs, take your mango, you know, your dried mangoes. You're not going to die if you eat them. But just bear in mind, like optimal, when we're looking at optimal health, we want our food to be juicy and hydrating because we are juicy. We are a very high water animal. And especially when we wake up in the morning as well, you know, we lose a lot of water in the state. We lose about 400 milliliters just through our skin every day. What's called transepidermal water loss. We lose about 400 mils just through the skin in normal existing. That's not regular sweat or anything. That's normal existence. And then you lose, you know, obviously we're losing it all the time through our bladder. And all of that, breath. And sweat and breath, exactly. Like all the crying over the capitalist hellscape we all live in. You know, like there's loads of ways that we all lose water.
Mostly tears. Yeah.
Mostly tears.
Mostly tears.
Oh, it's happy tears. And so yeah, one of the things I always say when you're really looking at skin health, and skin is also the skin. Do you know when you're born, 70% water. As an adult, 64% water, and when we get old, 50% water. But you know,
really,
yeah, it goes down even more. And so, you know, we really want to keep boosting that water level. You think of your body like a fountain, and the water that locks into our cells the best is water that's got like sugars and everything in it. It's isotonic, right? Like a sports drink. So in sports, you don't really eat. You know, plain water is actually not the best thing for hydration.
Right.
So when we eat whole the fruit, not dried, you're getting that isotonic liquid from the fruit. So it's actually getting into your cells.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is actually something that I've looked into a lot. So I'm a big cyclist, if anybody knows me, and it's good to know that you approve like the dehydrated food, because that's like my biggest like staple on like long bike rides. Is like I know that I can pop like 2 or 3 dates like every hour or so. But because it's just easy, super concentrated calories, and plus I never want to be one of those people that like sucks down like those power gels or like that is just I've tried one once and it's like. Yeah, I won't even describe it. It's disgusting.
Yeah, well, I don't even know what's in them, but yeah.
Mostly just like dextrose and like it's just like different forms of like carbohydrate and water. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, and very little water. But one of the things that I did learn through a lot of kind of the sports nutrition that I've learned is that that your insulin actually plays a huge role in overall hydration, which a lot of people don't recognize. And so if your insulin levels are far too low, then you can actually have a hard time hydrating properly as well, which I find to be interesting. Okay. And let's see, what about alcohol? Where does that fall into this category?
Always red.
Fantastic.
Always red, of course. I've been sober 6 years nearly. It'll be 6 years in November. It's a poison. It's just categorically a poison. End of story. I'm not going to judge anyone if you want to have a drink. I used to drink a lot. I was a real gin and tonic girl, cocktails, mimosas, all of the stuff. I loved it. I've been drinking a lot. I mean, I'm British. We start when we're about 12. Like that's not even a joke. We have Brits. I think Brits are known to be drunkards, aren't we? Like, let's be honest.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are kind of renowned for it. And so drinking culture to me was just normal. It was normal to be drunk every single weekend. And I grew up with that. But like, I am horrified, when you look at something like breast cancer, one of the biggest risk factors for breast cancer is alcohol consumption. And it doesn't even be a
Really?
lot. It can be like one glass of wine a night can raise your risk horrendously. Yeah, it's
Really?
really bad. And they don't tell you
Hmm.
this. Like I've seen, I remember watching a TV show where one of the like protagonists had like breast cancer and she was trying to look after herself. And at no point did her doctor in the show or her friends or any of the show mention alcohol. In fact, her way of relaxing was to have some more alcohol. And I'm like, oh my God, please stop. Yeah.
That's wild. I didn't know about that research. Wow.
Yeah, no,
Jeez, you're just blowing my mind today.
it's amazing. There's a lot that alcohol does to us that is not really widely known. And when you think about, how you brought up this subject earlier of like fruit sugar, this is what blows my mind is that people will say, imagine you're drinking some red grape juice and someone will go like, oh, juice is bad for you, it's too full of sugar. But then they'll have toxic red grape juice.
Right.
That
That is,
makes no
yeah, yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And then they'll also attach some random polyphenol
Yeah,
to that consumption. And they'll be like, I do it for the
yeah,
resveratrol.
exactly. They'll be like, oh my God,
Hmm.
take your juice away from me because that's full of sugar. But hang on, I'll have some red wine because it's got antioxidants. Yeah, there's antioxidants that are in the red grapes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's mostly in the skins of the grapes too, which
Yes.
is the other part.
Yeah.
It's like when you juice them, you actually lose a lot of that. Plus, just like a small serving of cacao goes really far for that. Yeah. And everybody loves chocolate.
Who doesn't love a small serving of cacao?
Oh, who doesn't love a small serving of cacao?
That's what I had for my breakfast actually, a big chocolate smoothie.
Really? Oh, that's
It
delicious.
was
I
so
love that. I always, it's like a lot of other things. Like the thing with me is like, since cacao can be kind of a stimulant as well. Like I think it's what is it, the theobromine or whatever it
yeah.
is that's in it. Yeah. And it's like that, it just, oh my gosh, just lights me on fire. It's like
I know.
jet fuel, which I need to be cognizant anytime I have anything with cacao because I'm like, I will go through the roof.
Yeah, no, it's amazing stuff. And I'm a woman and everyone knows that in a certain point of their monthly cycle, we all like crave chocolate because there are things in there that make us happy. And yeah, the theobromine, the other mood chemicals, it's a serotonin booster as well. It contains, it's a boost anandamide, which is the bliss chemical. It's a great mood food, but it's an amazing beauty food. There has been studies on people taking cacao and then going out in the sun, and they were able to stay in the sun twice as long as the people that didn't take the cacao before they got like actual side effects of like sun damage.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I did a little bit of a deep dive on like the sun damage thing before this podcast, just doing some of my research so I could hang. And like one of the things that I read into was like there are certain like polychemicals or polyphenols and other chemicals that are in a lot of like especially like fruits
Yeah.
and greens that can actually prevent
Yeah.
sunburn,
Yeah.
which is wild because my experience, and this is anecdotal, this is a study of one, right? Just myself. But like my experience was like when I was doing a fully 100% raw vegan diet. For anybody that doesn't know, that's where you eat nothing but fruits, vegetables, tiny little bit of nuts and seeds, leafy greens, sprouts. Like that's kind of your diet right there. And when I was consuming that diet, I could not sunburn. Like it was, I don't want to say could not, like it probably was possible. I didn't like live outside, but like I never worried about sunscreen.
Yeah.
And I also noticed that I didn't tan a whole lot either when I was consuming that diet. I actually stayed the same exact complexion, which is not like pasty white, but like not super tan either. But I never burned once.
It's
during that
amazing.
time.
Like I actually wrote a course called Dietary Sunscreen for this exact reason, because there's so much research coming out now that even like the scientists that work, that do a lot of like studies into like UV damage, they're basically saying like there needs to be a full spectrum approach to sunscreen, because for decades, all we've been told is like, what, stay out of the sun between 11 and 3, broad brimmed hat, factor whatever, and it's not working because the skin cancer rates are going up. People are getting sun damage still. It's not working. And so now what we're learning is like, actually what you eat makes a huge difference. It can actually speed up that damage. Just again, so we're talking about these same 12 cellular pathways doing this work as well. So when the sun hits your skin, and it sets up all kinds of things like oxidative damage, like loads of oxidative. God, I can't talk. What's the word? Free radicals. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I've had too much caffeine. I've had too much cacao today, obviously.
No worries.
This is be careful, kids.
Yeah. This is when it like tips over into what I remember being called Krakow from the raw vegan days. Yeah.
So I've had too much cacao today. But yeah, so these free radicals are causing all this damage. And when there are certain vitamins and phytochemicals will actually sit in the skin layers, and some of them are UV absorbers. Some of them will actually diminish the free radical response. So they all do slightly different jobs. And so that's, again, why we always want to have variety in our diets and get all the different colors and all the different plants going in there. But yeah, it's a real big topic coming out now, because they're realizing that the sunscreen is half the job. It's only protecting us about 40-50%. Whereas something like the selenium in Brazil nuts, they saw that people that had a high serum level of selenium had a 60% less risk of basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, two skin cancers which are really common.
Yeah, I actually did hear about the selenium thing a long time ago. It was, but I think at the time someone was trying to sell me a supplement of selenium. But yeah, I used to consume Brazil nuts just as like a supplement. I used to think of it as like taking my selenium supplement because, yeah, I'm like, oh, I've got my one Brazil nut, which is like more than 100% of your daily selenium.
Yeah. Yep. And you know what? Like if you made your own like cacao coated ones, like with raw chocolate and keep them in the fridge, then you've got like the cacao with which is also a dietary sunscreen as well. So you get a double dose and it's tasty.
And I was gonna say, it's a dangerous food. That is the one where it's like that's where it's like the impulse control is. That's
when it turns into Krakow. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh God bless the Krakow. All right, I've got one more food in this green light, yellow light, red light. So what about we're seeing, like, especially in the age of the influencer, like there's a lot of people that are pushing out like these greens powders. So things like AG1, if you've seen that.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like mostly it seems, I've looked at the ingredients, it's like dehydrated grass powders, kale, like stuff like. Oh, what's your take on those?
I mean, this is nothing new. The people are pushing powders all the time. Like even before like the internet, like people have been pushing powders and this because there's just more money in it. There's more money in selling supplements and powdered superfoods than there is in just saying to someone, like I would make more money from you saying, take my selenium supplement, than just by telling you, go buy some Brazil nuts from down the road near where you live and eat them. I make no money from that, so it's all money orientated. But again, like I've got nothing against like these, if it's a very natural one without loads of fillers and rubbish in there, if it's just like powdered superfoods and herbs and spices or whatnot, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are someone that, maybe can't, maybe you live in an area of the world where it's very difficult to get a wide variety of plant foods. I know some people live in plant deserts. Not plant desert, what's it called? Food deserts.
Food deserts, yeah. I know what you're saying.
Oh my goodness. It's because it's nighttime here now. My brain is starting to like, my melatonin is starting to come out and I'm like, ooh. I need some more Krakow, obviously. Come on.
There you go.
Send me some through the camera. So that'll be the future. So yeah.
Scary future.
But yeah, I mean, I think like these things can have their place, especially if you're not able to always get to the foods, that you need to fulfill all those things. But there's nothing special in these powders that you can't just get from regular foods. Especially things like, foraging is making a comeback, I notice. People are starting to forage more. Like, you can, like, nettle, the common nettle is like one of the biggest powerhouses of nutrients. It's insane. And yet, no one's commercialized it yet. God help us when they do, because then everyone's going to be selling that as a powder. But, right now it's free. Go and pick some.
I was gonna say it's like dandelion too. Is like one of the most abundant. Like most people consider it a weed.
Yeah.
And like here in the U.S., it's like it's the most common like lawn weed. So everybody loves their huge lawns with all their grasses. And I'm just gonna roll my eyes heavily at that. But like dandelion is one of the biggest like nuisances, and it's such an amazing food. It's one of those where you can literally like I have foraged. I'm going to put that in air quotes because it's really just picking it through the cracks in the pavement sometimes. But I am also seeing a big resurgence of foraging, which I'm excited about. The guy that I had on the last podcast, Ben, the vegan farmer, he has actually got an entire foraging YouTube channel as like kind of like a side gig that he does. Yeah. So I'm seeing it come back. I love it.
I love it too. I've been doing it since I was a kid, and I'm just like, I live in the urban environment, but there's a massive park opposite my house, and I just wander over there and I pick things and bring them home and make herbal tea from the park. They got all kinds of things growing in there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And, it's lost knowledge, and I think this is the thing that we see in nutrition and health all the time is that, it's very easy to believe what an influencer is saying when they're going, oh, this has got some complicated word salad of an ingredient in it. And, because we're not really taught a lot about empowered nutrition for ourselves. And, so it's easy to be sold to, especially in this day and age when we're all doom scrolling TikTok.
Right. Yeah.
Whatnot. And I'm just as guilty as that, by the way. I'm a pro doom scroller.
Same.
Right. And, it's easy to, even sometimes I get caught up and I go, wait, do I need that thing that they're telling me? And then I'm like, give yourself a shake, woman. You know this stuff. And, so there's nothing that you can't get in ordinary foods. And this is one of my messages is that I want people to feel empowered to be their own nutritionist, and you can do that with the foods that are in your natural environment, the foods that are in your local grocery store, the herbs and spices that are in your cupboard right now. There isn't really a need to spend a lot of money on these specialized things, which are mostly, anyway, that was me covering up the wrong word.
I got you. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And it's, it reminds me of something that somebody said a long time ago. I can't remember who it was, so I'm not going to be able to give appropriate credit, but they were saying there's kind of a beautiful thing to eating a whole foods plant-based diet. And it also comes with a little bit of heartbreak at the same time, which is the absolute beautiful thing is money doesn't grow on trees, but food does.
Right.
And quite literally, it is the thing that could give you your greatest health that you've ever had in your entire life. But because of that, because it grows on trees, because it's the thing you could go out and pick right now. On my way to the farmer's market this morning, we walked by a tree stump that had reishi mushroom growing out of the side of it. I could harvest that and make a tea, a reishi mushroom tea. And that would have cost me $0 in a walk. Like, phenomenal. The downside, if you are wanting to make money in this industry,
right,
you have to package and sell something to somebody in a capitalist society, which, with all the water that we lose from our tears, which we've learned, comes from that capitalist hellscape. Yep. Just to bring it back full circle. That is the heartbreak of it all.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad if they're selling stuff. It's more like these bigger corporations who are then using influencers, because that's all that MLM, multi-level marketing stuff. And, I've got nothing, I don't have any problem with some, independent person going, do you know what? I grow all these reishi mushrooms. I'm going to sell that.
No problem.
No problem with that.
Zero issue. Make your money.
Yeah, make your money. Yeah. I think we should all be our own bosses and all make our own money somehow, doing something that actually helps other people. Right?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's the reason why I'm doing this podcast. And if I could angle the camera just a little bit over, you'd see the day job desk that I have as well. It's like, we all have our own journeys that we're on. And for me, this is this is my journey to my own way of making my own income for myself. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah, actually, that's a really good segue, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well is your entrepreneurship. And on a previous podcast that I saw you on, you said, or you described it as entrepreneurship being like another path to enlightenment and spiritualization, which I really liked that. And I resonated heavily with that. So what specifically have you experienced that makes you feel like that is the case?
Endless rejection and heartache. I mean, it's like the biggest, you know what I mean? It's like, I call it the biggest spiritual journey I've ever done, because like so much of what is shown to us online, especially again these days, of like what spiritualism is, like, oh, I sat in meditation for 5 minutes and I banged my crystal ball and I did the right chant, and like that's all good stuff too. Like not yeah, I also do that stuff as well.
Sure.
But like it's not doing, like you're isolating and you're doing a tiny thing. But actually what life is the spiritual journey. Like all the setbacks, the knocks, like how you deal with those is actually what grows you as a person. So when you become self-employed and you build something of your own and you put it out in the world, it's incredibly terrifying, because you're facing rejection. And for those of us that have abandonment wounds and rejection issues, which is probably like a lot of us have, like, we're in a capitalist hellscape, so we've come from parents that weren't healed and blah blah blah, and so facing rejection is really difficult. And one of the things that I have experienced is that, and I'm not religious, I'll just say that now, but there's a concept, I think, I'm not sure if it's in the Bible or it's in Christianity in general, but like when you take the first step, the road comes up to meet you. And it reminds me of that, is it like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, or one of those? No, what's the final one of those 3 movies?
Oh man, I'm probably not the right person to ask.
Have you not watched them?
Hold on, I'm going to Google it right now. Indiana Jones.
Last Crusade. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Ah, there we go. Nice.
So he has to go through a series of tests, and one of them is like he has to walk across this chasm, right? This big, deep, like a Grand Canyon type thing, but there's no pathway, and he's like, oh my god! But then he throws some sand, and actually the pathway was painted to look exactly like the rocks opposite. So the path was there all the time. And he had to take a leap of faith from the lion's head. It was the immortal lion in the movie. So he just had to step. And as he stepped, the pathway was there after all. And that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. Because, as humans, we always want to know the grand plan. And so I'm like, if I set this business up, will I definitely make money? Will this happen? And we're like projecting like months down the line. But it's one foot in front of the other. Like the minute you put one foot, the next step doesn't actually become clear until you've taken that first step.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Right?
Honestly, it also just makes me think of something that's wildly different than what you're talking about, but it also kind of applies too, which is the infamous Frederick Douglass. So he was a, abolitionist, and he has the quote that I prayed for 20 years for freedom, but did not receive my freedom until I prayed with my legs.
Oh, right. Exactly. It's you've got to have the thought and the ideas and all that too, but it's the doing. Like the magic is in the doing. So you can lay around and pontificate all you like, and you can meditate on it, and you can vision board about it. But if you don't take actual action, and the blood, the sweat, the tears, the rejection, trudging through the nonsense, that's the growth. That's the journey.
Yeah. Well said. Gave me some goosebumps there. I like it. I love it. All right. Well, I think that is a fantastic spot. We are just crossing over hour and 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Star, my God, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and blowing my mind multiple times and then leaving me with goosebumps.
Ooh,
like that is...
I like that. That's
yeah,
my work is...
It's just... Absolutely. Slam dunks all around. So for anybody that is looking to find Star Khechara, there is a few places that you can. So Star's social media handle that you will find her at is The Age Hacker. So Instagram at The Age Hacker, TikTok as well at The Age Hacker, and then YouTube at The Age Hacker as well. And then, of course, they can find you at starkhechara.com. So let's go ahead and spell that out. So that's StarKhechara.
I know, my very complicated name.
No, it's fantastic. All right, Star, thank you so much for joining us. And for those that haven't already done all the things, you know how to do this. This is the internet. This is the currency of the internet. If you could please share this with somebody, if you could please hit those like buttons, subscribe buttons, comment. If you have an issue with anything that we've said today, fantastic. I am over the moon that you disagree. Please tell us down below.
I love a good debate. I'm an ENTP. I will take it.
Absolutely. Same. I love that. Also, be forewarned that my brain is forever broken and I do not actually ever receive criticism. I only see it as curiosity. So I will just answer your questions that are behind it. But with that being said, Star, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.